Right. That's my goal. No point. Right? That's it. Yes. Oh, Emily. I told her I have to find that out. Yeah. Oh, yeah. They're not looking. Yes. That's yours. Sorry. I've seen people drive with their feet. That's it. Yes, yes, yes. I've seen that. They're working on the college budget when he's sleeping. Just rare. Just rare. Did you? Rare.
presented.
Okay, so I think you've already kind of answered the very next question. Yeah.
Again, some of the fees are restrictive, like technology fee has to be for certain things, capital improvement fee, financial aid fees, all the separate fees that aren't the base tuition have stipulations as to what they can be spent on.
And then Brian, do you want to also cover the insurance costs, those fixed items that the college has to absolutely address?
Yeah, do you want me to go into that, or do you have other questions?
Because that's something that we don't have that much dramatic control over with having to meet that need.
I think for most of us, we don't really understand exactly what we do have control over. So, I mean, to get to this point, we have to understand the budget.
I mean, to summarize it pretty quickly, if you take where we're at, here's where we're at. What does the state give us new money? The last 2 years, they gave us a little over 200,000 on, $52-53 million budget. That's really nothing. The things they mandate on you is the pension, what our pension contribution is. The insurance is we're an insurance consortium. They do the best job possible to get the best rate, but their increases have been anywhere from 6 to 10%. The market is 10% over. The only way to control the cost on that is keep reducing the person's benefits and the deductibles, which we have not done. So those two things have hit us the last 2 years and taken away the 200,000 that we're giving us more money. So the last 2 years, you're basically trying to play with the same amount of money you have and just reallocate it based on which the priorities are and what you need done. So it's been an extreme challenge in the last 2 years. And a lot of the money they give you, the performance money, previous years they had performance money where years ago when they started it, they took a portion out of your base budget and said you had to earn it back, and then gave you a portion you could earn additionally. Well, we always earned the portion back that they took out of our base, but some years we earned the performance money, the next year we missed it by a fraction of a point, the next year we got it, the next year we missed it. And when May came around and they're finishing the session, all of a sudden they said, you know what, that whole performance-based funding plan's gone. We're giving you the base back that we originally said you had to earn back. They counted it as new money, but it wasn't new money. Then they gave everybody, under two new performance measures they put in, they gave everybody basically the amount back that was the other performance measure. But again, it's a special appropriation, so you have no idea if they're going to allocate that money again next year. And the performance measures in that one were based on 17-18 year, which was already in the books. And so if they appropriate again next year, it's based off 18-19 numbers. And we haven't been shown all the information how the calculations are done. So unlike the old performance-based measure system where we started to figure out and know and try and realign what we were doing to meet performance, we really don't know what we need to do to meet this performance and if this performance money is going to exist. So for years, we've always treated that money as non-recurring. The non-recurring is non-recurring salary increases, things that don't happen over and over again, because we don't want to commit that money to positions and then the year later say, guess what, we're going to need to cut $900,000 out of the budget. Where are we cutting? So we've been very conservative with calling that non-recurring because that is the nature of it. So we're very sensitive to what's non-recurring and allocate it to non-recurring things so we don't put ourselves in a negative position the following year.
Okay. Yes, you're kind of checking off different ones as we go here, so.
Oh, of course, sure.
Well, yeah, so there's another question here so the question is if we were to raise tuition, what are the restrictions on how that money can be used compared to other sort of, general state funding, performance funding,
So again,
student fee?
it's based on administration and assignment of priorities, and then the board actually has to approve the budget.
But it's within the board's power
Within the
to
board's
do.
power.
Okay.
One thing talked about too is previous years the state had given the college what's called PECO, Public Education Capital Outlay money, to do repairs to buildings on an annual basis. And our annual allocation over the last couple of years has been $600,000. This year, they didn't give any money to any of the schools and said, you guys figure out how to do it yourself. So, we're covering it this year with excess money we had from previous years we didn't spend, but when we go into next year, I keep telling the administration, the challenge is how do we maintain our buildings without that money, and then does that have to come back out of operational money now to do that? So there's a lot of challenges going forward.
Yeah, the PICO issue has been a huge issue at the K-12 level for many years. There was 5 or 6 years when the whole PICO allocation for public schools was $0. So they put it all into building new charter schools. So that's,
Again, another negative for us has been GPA enrollment's been declining. GPA enrollment doesn't include the dual enrollment students. The dual enrollment students who come onto our campus, we can bill the school system, but we bill them at a reduced tuition rate, and we don't get any of those other capital improvements, technology fees, any of those fees. So we continue to build our budget on a negative enrollment projection because we don't want to be in the position. The trend has been going down. The number of graduates coming out of high school the next couple of years going down. So with the economy, being good, the people who are the non-traditionals are working. So you're going after the high school. The high school is dropping the next 2 year graduates. After that, it'll go back up. So we thought it was prudent to be more conservative again this year, not as conservative as the year before, but actually projecting again the enrollment decline and basing the budget off that. Because otherwise, you build a budget, you put all these expectations, and you start the next budget year, you're in the hole and you're in a cut situation. And as you know, with the president, current president, previous presidents, we value personnel, and we want to protect personnel and not have to eliminate any positions, which we have not done. We've eliminated some vacant positions over the year, but we've never taken a physical person in a position and actually eliminated.
one question we haven't spoken to specifically yet, but a few people have asked. What about foundation money? Can that be used for things in this contract? Salaries, benefits, things like that.
Historically, it is not. Historically, it goes to support scholarships. It goes to some of the money we get donated. It has restrictions on it. It's restricted. We've gotten large donations for health areas, restricted to scholarships and to equipment. So we've been using that for equipment that would normally come out of the college budget can be funded by that. But there's really not any donors who donate money and say, I want to give you money to compensate and pay for salaries. Now, going forward, as we're building a foundation campaign for the 50th anniversary, that is one of the things we want to try to look at is the possibility, contribute toward a program, contribute for equipment, as well as maybe to help contribute towards salaries, again, to help some offset some costs.
And correct me if I'm wrong, the foundation does contribute some to the benefits in terms of things like sabbaticals and stuff like
Yes,
that.
sabbaticals, various program
SPD,
development, staff
professional
program
development.
the all college day, various things to, program development, staff and program development.
So money that is contributed to the foundation typically has strings attached to it that don't include giving people raises.
A huge percentage of it is endowments, and endowments you can't spend the principal, you can only spend the interest, and then there's criteria set by the donors, specifically how you can spend the money.
If I win Powerball, I'll make a huge endowment just for salaries.
Very holding you to that.
No problem. I'd probably give most of it away.
Some of the other things too that have increased over the years besides insurance, we continue to do the degrees in longevity, which are to the tune of almost $200,000 a year. And years ago, that's why we made them non-recurring, because in 5 years' time, we would have added $1 million reoccurring to the budget, which means we would have had to cut $1 million in expenses. So every year you added and put out $200,000, you'd have to find somewhere to cut $200,000. So that's why we changed them to one time. We had a set amount of money one time that kept reoccurring and treat it more like a bonus type situation. Staff and program development. We spent over $120,000 in tuition reimbursement, and a total of over $300,000 in total staff and program development. Very unknown sick leave payout, vacation leave payouts for people who are leaving, going into retirement, going into pensions. is over $400,000 a year. Again, those are benefits to the employee that not everybody sees, but you see them at some point in your career as you're accumulating them, going into retirement, those are being paid out. Insurance over the last 2 years, the colleges have covered over $500,000 of increase just to maintain the insurance as is. So again, those, with the pension increases, so those are a lot of things that, people don't really recognize on the front end that are costs that the college continues to cover going forward.
Okay, well, I think I probably already know the answer to this one, but it was asked, and we'll make sure that questions that are getting asked get answered. But money for the Performing Arts Center, is that money that has that's a specific string attached to that money? Could that money be reallocated for other things?
The IPAC, again, is a PICO, Public Education Capital Outlay. There's two components I told you about, the maintenance money, and the other money is where they appropriate to build the building. So those funds were appropriated to build the building. That's for the purpose they can be spent.
Okay, cool. So kind of a follow-up question on the tuition issue. If tuition were to be raised, let's just say it's raised to $1 per credit hour, then does that mean for every credit hour that a student takes, the college is actually going to receive another $1 for that?
Mhm.
Or
correct.
Okay, so it's people who are on Brett Futures and things like that, the tuition increase, college would still receive
Correct.
tuition money even though those people aren't
Yeah,
paying
a
out.
lot, people have other forms of financial aid. Either the aid's paying for it or the person's paying for it directly.
Okay. All right. Finally, and it's not asking this for the intent of being confrontational, but it's a question that came up frequently, so it's our job to ask. In the last 5 or so years, have there been any sort of recurring or non-recurring salary that's been granted to essentially non-faculty, whether it's administrators or staff? Has there been a situation where there's been money given to one but not the other?
Everything's been across the board. The faculty and staff have all got the same increase, whether they're reoccurring or not.
And when you say across the board, you mean everyone gets $1,000, everyone gets 2%, or?
Yeah, the last couple of years when we've done the non-recurring, it's been the 2% or $1,000. Last year we did the non-recurring and we did the recurring at 2%. It was straight across the board.
Okay, so it sounds like the answer is no. There's not been a
And again,
differential.
there's nuances of 2%, $1,000. You have to have been here the whole year. If you're here half a year, you get half the amount. So if you're 50% staff employee, you get 50% of that, not the 100%. So it's pro rata based on those criteria.
Right, which are uniform.
Evenly applied to everyone.
Okay, I think that makes sense. Has anything that's come up in any of the discussion provoked any additional questions from the team?
One thing I would point out that I didn't mention earlier, and maybe Ryan, you can speak to this, is we're negotiating, of course, for a full contract. Ideally, we would like to have agreement on these items for this year. When would this stuff show up in paychecks? July 1, it goes into effect, right? Everything.
Showing up in the next paycheck.
So,
But for this situation, the next paycheck, basically you're going to make what you made last year. The thing is planned for the August 23rd will be when the longevities are paid out, or not the longevities, the non-recurring. So the 2% of $1,000 will be paid out August, I think, 23rd. You have to finalize the date. And I believe in September is when we pay the longevity and the degrees that are non-recurring. So the people that were grandfathered in at the degrees that were recurring will see that in their paycheck, the next paycheck. But again, the faculty don't start getting paid till.
Actually, they're still on, if they did not, no resignation or anything of that nature, I believe that August 1st, they did.
So those individuals are coming back that got the reoccurring degree that were grandfathered in will see an increase in their pay there. The other people, like I said, the degrees or longevities will be, I think, planned for late September. And the bonus, I can't call it a bonus, the non-recurring salary distribution, 2% of 1,000 will be paid out. It's planned August 23rd. We're trying to finalize that.
In like a full lump sum amount?
Full lump sum amount, same way as the longevities and non-recurring degrees.
Okay. All right, well, I think we'll certainly have, plenty to talk about with this. We have a few proposals for you as well. I think they're all.
I guess just maybe one comment back
Sure.
to you guys, though. I know you guys originally proposed like a step system. And again, the challenge to us with the step system is, in a sense, we're guaranteeing raises every year. And as we talked about the last 2 years, you only get $200,000 of new money. It covers, in a sense, what you consider fixed cost already. There's not the additional money that always contribute to a plan that's already said you have to guarantee a step.
Right, yeah, and I guess what I would say to that in response is that a step system doesn't necessarily entail steps every year. I mean, usually whether or not a step is received is the subject of negotiations every year. In good times, parties may agree to 2 or 3 years, so they don't have to fuss about it. But typically that is something that's bargained every year. The step system is just sort of there. It's a structure. It's not a permanent commitment. So, but I mean, I hear what you're saying. Yeah, not practical in any situation for any institution to commit to 30 straight years of raises, but we think there's still value in having that kind of structure. But we'll certainly talk more about that. Okay, so you had asked us to look at management rights, which we did, and in our review, we found a couple of other sort of bits and bobs that were sort of in our court to be addressed well. So we tried to collect all of those to give to you today. This first item that we're passing is Article 4.2, is use of facilities. The only thing here that was sort of remaining to be resolved was Part B about email. And what we did was we looked at essentially every other college that currently has a collective bargaining agreement, just saw kind of what they had. That's on the remaining 3 pages of what you've got here. And as you'll see, all but one allows use of email in some form or fashion. So we made some changes to our proposal to try and make it more in line with what is typical. So you'll see a couple of changes in Section B there. We struck out the requirement by the college to maintain an email list on behalf of the union for this purpose. And we put in a requirement by the union to provide any communications it sends concurrently to the college president, which was something that seemed to be common in other contracts. But the concept of access to email was pretty typical in the other contracts. So this is something that we think is pretty fair and reasonable type of thing to have. So this is our proposal on this for today. There are no questions on that one. I will start passing out the next one.
No questions at the moment.
Yeah, we'll have to focus on that one.
So this is benefits. We made a couple of changes to this one. Previous discussion we had around benefits was, okay, we're part of the consortium. Should we have to sit down and negotiate every time the consortium changes something? And we agree that that would be a pain in the neck. So as you'll notice in section 11.1A, we've added the phrase, that there's no changes unless negotiated except as authorized in this section. And then down in 11.2, you'll see essentially a recognition that, you know, if the consortium changes something, it doesn't need to be bargained as long as we're participating in the consortium. We are reserving the right to negotiate in the sense that if we provide a timely notification that we actually want to sit down and negotiate that, then that's what we do. But, you know, so long as everything's going well with the consortium, and so I guess it would be extremely, I can't imagine why, unless there was just some huge, we suddenly became some huge demographic outlier. I can't imagine a situation where we get a better deal on our own rather than by participating in the consortium. So don't expect to need to use this right in the foreseeable future, but do want to maintain it. So that's our proposal on that issue, is essentially nothing needs to be bargained unless we give you essentially 6 months notice before the next plan year takes effect that it's something we want to bargain. Yes, I skipped 11.1D. I don't think it was ever anyone's intent that this not be the case. But it was pointed out that we didn't have language to this effect, and so we wanted to put it in. But basically, faculty who were employed the previous year and will be employed the following year continue to have access to their benefits during the summer. Don't think that's too controversial, but thought that was worth putting into the contract. And then finally, in section 11.7, there's a change there. Pointed out that we don't have anything talking about the ability to participate in the optional retirement program, which I believe was in the IMMs, relevant IMMs. So we just put in here that that's something that bargaining members have the option to do if they choose. So those are the three kind of changes in there. Two of them, I think, hopefully shouldn't be at all controversial. And the other one, I think we're recognizing the, you know, impracticality of bargaining benefits when we're part of the consortium, but at the same time, it is something we have the right to do and don't necessarily want to waive that.
I have a question. As part of the consortium, we're locked into whatever they kind of deem, you know, I don't know, yeah. Can we purchase additional, like for instance, if you wanted to purchase like Delta Dental Level 3 and pay the additional cost or whatever, can we do that?
So the answer is, if we decided as a college to keep certain plans that are offered, that's obviously offered by the consortium, then yes. But essentially at that point, the college would not be covering anything, and we would say, okay, whatever we cover, anything above that, the employee will cover, and there wouldn't be anything, the language that was part of our proposal would be in play, basically. There wouldn't be anything that would be strictly for one group of employees versus another.
Right.
It would obviously be across the board.
Okay.
But I believe the answer to that is yes, but I can verify. Just to
Okay.
make sure.
Cool.
And
Thanks.
then the insurance plans are the plans they make available that they have to offer. So we have the PPO, HMO, that are called Cadillac plans, HMO, PPO, they're traditional plans, and now the HSA. But, so those plans, you can select whatever plans they have available. But if they cancel any of those plans or discontinue them, then you can no longer have those plans.
Okay.
And essentially a good example of that would be our quote unquote Cadillac plans that, you know, for years and years, I haven't been here that long, but from what I've been told, years and years, we've been told that, hey, the Cadillac plans could drop at any point. Well, Florida Blue is essentially saying that is going to happen. They're going to end up dropping the Cadillac plan. So right now, as a college, if we wanted to, you know, we are in a position where we have to make decisions, or we could just wait it out between now and whenever that sunset date occurs, and at which point they drop it, and we no longer have an option, to that effect. A lot of it has to do, obviously, with the cost as well. They're looking at the usage, they're looking at the whole thing just to see what we can do, not only as a college, but as a consortium, because that's where we get our buying power from. So see what we can do to control costs, but still offer the benefits to all of our employees. So just kind of use it as an example.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions or comments? All right, coming across the table next is tuition reimbursement. From our initial proposal, we talked about this a little bit when we had the discussion about, I think the specific example was nursing faculty who need to take a CPR course, but then are having to pay, the $50 fee or whatever it is to take that course. But obviously not the only issue taken up in this section. So for that specific question, we had previously inserted that the underlined phrase in paragraph A there, coursework including non-credit coursework, which would include that CPR course. Free of charge. And then there was no, in our proposal on tuition reimbursement for employees, there was no limitation on the amount to be reimbursed. As expensive as some institutions are, that's probably not practical to have reimbursement without limit. The current limit was the tuition at the University of South Florida Tampa campus. We're proposing 1.5 times that amount, just because there are graduate programs that employees may want to participate in that simply aren't available at that campus and are only available at Florida State or University of Florida, or even an out-of-state institution that may be more expensive, and not being able to be reimbursed for that may limit faculty members' abilities to take advantage of that. So we're proposing an increase, but at the same time, a limit. Of course, given the budget conversation we're having, it's probably worth knowing, okay, exactly how much is this costing currently, so we can have an idea of, kind of what the total dollar amount to that is. So I don't know if that information is easy to get, but that would probably be helpful in this conversation. But we noticed that there wasn't a limit, and we're proposing a higher limit than currently exists here. I think it's fairly straightforward.
Can you speak to letter A, the spouse or dependent free of charge request?
Yes. So I guess to kind of go to economic speak, the marginal cost of having a person in a classroom when the class is already going to be taught is essentially, to the college, is essentially zero. So we thought it wouldn't be a significant commitment of resources to provide for that. It is something that some other institutions do offer that, and we thought it would be a good benefit for employees that would be at minimal cost to the college.
So in your statement, you're assuming that there could be a criteria if the space was available.
I don't think our intent here was to impel the college to open up another section just to allow for that to happen. If that's something you want to put in there, I think that's probably pretty reasonable. Any other questions?
Can we go back to Article 11 on the Employee Benefits Committee?
Sure.
Letter B, the reference to the Employee Benefits Committee shall be impaneled. Now, our Employee Benefits Committee, I'm presuming you're talking about the exact Employee Benefits Committee that the college already has in accordance with our IMM. on the committee structure, 2.1. So you are asking that the union appoint at least half of the members of the composition of that committee.
Yes,
Can you
so
speak
this,
to that?
yeah, so one of the ways, so, and there's a lot of this, again, this is coming from kind of K-12 experience, but and usually it's the union appoints half, management appoints half is typically how it ends up working. But when there's equal participation on that committee, there's sort of equal buy-in to the process and the outcomes of that committee. And it generally makes people, even if there aren't necessarily substantive differences in what happens, it makes people feel as though they were fully represented in the committee and in its deliberations. So it's more of a smooth labor management relations thing than, rocking the boat and making huge changes type of thing.
Because currently, that committee is comprised of a cross-section of all representatives of the college, career service administrators, and faculty already occupy seats and boards on the committee.
Mhm.
So you're suggesting that half of the committee should be comprised exclusively of union appointees.
That is the proposal.
Can you speak to 4.2, letter B, just your intention, so I understand that clearly in my mind? The language in subsection B is significantly different from my interpretation to the language in your example on page 3. If you look at UFMDC, starts in addition, UFMDC may distribute union messages to the individual email boxes of bargaining unit members, so long as a copy of all messages distributed is supplied concurrently to the Vice Provost of Human Resources, etc. That's significantly different from the language in the first sentence of B. Can you speak to your intention for the email? Which is it? Is it to have a mass distribution, i.e. Enterprise access, groups access, as opposed to just communicating with your bargaining members individually?
I'm not sure I read a significant difference between the first sentences and each of those two things.
So the word individual email boxes, the phrase individual email boxes speaks differently to me than it does the union shall have the right to use without cost the internal college mail system, the entire system, including email, to provide a notice of meetings and make other announcements of general nature to members of this bargaining unit. So to me, that speaks differently than having access to an individual email box, just sending individual emails.
I guess as long as we have the ability to reach everyone's email boxes in whatever form or fashion, I don't think it
Send
really matters
individual
to us.
email just to correspond with them, not have access to, let's say, a bargaining member group through an email system that you can just make and post announcements.
I'm trying to figure out what the
So
difference
group
is with this
we would have to
distinction.
create a group in Active Directory specifically for the union. So that's different from you as a union rep sending emails to your bargaining unit.
Right, I think what you're talking about is what we relieved you of the proposed obligation to do in the sentence that we struck, which says the college shall maintain an email list of members for this purpose.
Right, but for me, that language is a little broad as well, so I just wanted to get your intention.
So basically, you
just want access to communicate with them
right. So in other
via
words,
email.
you want to have carte blanche access to our faculty distribution list. So when administration provides faculty communication about college-related matters, as we customarily do, are you saying that you want equal access to that exact list, or are you requesting a separate list just for paid union members, or are you talking about the entire collective bargaining, the entire faculty body?
I don't, maybe this is something I need to check with our Cox about, but my understanding is it's not, we don't care how it happens. We just, if we send an email to someone, we don't want to, no, you can't do that. You can't say the word union on college. Like, it's just, you know, we want to be able to send people emails. We don't care how, we don't care. We don't want you to make a bunch of effort to make it happen. We just want to not be stopped from doing it.
Sure, so we'll work on that language now that I understand your intention.
Okay. is
You
that-
wanna
is
be
that
able to
correct,
say-
Caitlin?
Yeah, I mean, we can make a list. It's not that hard to do a email
Yeah,
list.
but
And if
we
we,
don't
wa-
have to create.
yeah, we're willing to maintain a bargaining unit number list because we get that from public records anyway. It's not that hard to make a list in Outlook. So either, that's fine.
We just want the right to use the system.
Yeah,
The right to email each other.
correct.
Right, we don't want people getting disciplined for, because, we've talked a lot about, can you use the email for union stuff? And your position has been, no, we don't want people getting disciplined because they sent an email saying, hey, we're gonna have a department union meeting at
Right.
3 o'clock or
But
whatever.
you're
I
also
mean,
not talking about using it as enterprise as an announcement or in that, you're
Yeah,
just
I don't-
talking specifically that you email your specific members and your PHSC.edu email address.
Can I ask a question on Article 14? And on the non-credit coursework, for the ed-to-go stuff that a lot of faculty take for their recertification, how is that paid for?
I didn't catch your question.
For the non-credit coursework, which would be all the ed-to-goes that we offer under the workforce division, if a faculty member often takes that as a recertification requirement, a 5-year research, how is that paid for through the budget? Because I know the faculty doesn't pay for it.
So tuition reimbursement, the same.
But those courses have ranging fees, so is it the fees, it's a tuition reimbursement for the entire fee?
There's a form, Stacy, that goes with that, and I believe it explains the breakdown on how the fees are paid and if there's any limits. I think it's on that form.
Mhm.
Off the top of my head, I can't tell you what the form number is, but it should be under college forms for reimbursement. And there's a couple of different scenarios. One is if it's required by the employer. The other, if it's just something somebody wants to do just because they're interested in it. I think there's still some reimbursement in either scenario, but the breakdown should be on that form. Because I believe the tuition is paid for, and an additional fee is a processing fee is what the employee pays.
Because they're very variable. I mean, some are very inexpensive and some are quite pricey, and I know faculty can take them for research credit. So they are, they're non-credit coursework, and I'm just looking at section A. How's that paid for? Same question, trying to figure out. Thank you.
Okay, anything else on 4, 11, or 14?
I don't think so.
Finally, management rights. And once I get this handed out, I'll flip back to your proposal and kind of comment on the differences here. So management rights was not something we had in our original proposal. You had it in yours. You asked for a response, so we've got a response here. Now, in my experience, I don't know. Brian, I think you've probably been doing this longer than me. Maybe you have different experience. I don't think I've ever had an arbitration turn on what's in the management rights article. So that said, I think, conceptually, I don't think we're necessarily going to be that far apart here. I've never been crazy about just having these kind of laundry lists of different things that are management rights in contracts. I think it's not necessarily useful or necessary. Going down the list, most of these I don't even necessarily disagree are already conferred by statute or case law for most of this stuff. The two, and I'm looking at your proposal, the two that were a little bit problematic for us, I think, were your letter N, which entails the right to maintain, enforce, promulgate, rescind, or revise college policies, procedures, rules, practices, and directives to the extent not inconsistent with an express term of this agreement. And the issue there is, well, if a revision to a college policy has the effect of altering wages, hours, or terms and conditions of employment, then that needs to be bargained. And so if it said, something like revise college policies that don't impact wages, hours, terms and conditions of employment, I don't think that would necessarily be an issue. But that's one that stood out as a little bit problematic for us, because if it does affect wages, hours, terms and conditions, and changes are being made, then in our view, they need to be bargained. And the second one that was a little bit problematic for us was T, alter or vary past practices the college may determine to be necessary for the orderly and efficient operations of the college. I kind of read this as having largely the same effect as N, except, in situations where a revision to a college policy isn't necessary. We think that if there are going to be changes to things, whether it's written down or not, that have an effect on wages, hours, terms, and conditions of employment, those are things that we think need to be bargained. So our proposal, as I'll get to in a second, has an assertion of that right. Section 2, the college's failure to exercise a right shall not be deemed a waiver of its right to exercise it in the future. And maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like that's probably a little bit redundant with something we signed off on in Article 3. This 3.4 waiver section has very similar language. Failure to be the party to perform or require performance of right, duty, obligation is not a waiver. So I wasn't sure that seemed a little bit redundant to me. I don't disagree with the concept. Just because you don't use a management right once doesn't mean you don't have that right anymore. I mean, that's kind of ridiculous. So I'm not opposed to the concept, but wasn't sure that it needed to be said again. Sections 3 and 4, I think you'd be unsurprised to hear we're not really interested in entertaining. Section 3 was a broad, very broad waiver, essentially gives the college unilateral ability to suspend the terms of the contract. Well, and in conjunction with Section 4, really with no recourse for us, right? Because there's no ability to grieve anything in this article. So even if we did feel that it wasn't an emergency or catastrophe that justified suspending a term or condition of employment, we wouldn't have any recourse because we would be able to grieve it. So that was just a bit too much. So we left both of those out in our proposal. Our proposal essentially quotes the statute from which all the case law that gives rise to your A through T, in my opinion, with the exception of N and T itself. Those, of course, all derive from that statute. So I think that's all implicit in what we've proposed here. We do have a sentence at the end, lines 8 through 10, saying that nothing in management rights, whatever we end up agreeing to on management rights, is going to need to have this in it. That it doesn't limit the right of the union to bargain the impact of decisions made within the scope of management rights on wages, hours, terms, and conditions of employment. So that's our proposal on management rights. Despite the fact that it's much shorter, I don't think there's a whole lot of conceptual difference here. It's really just those sections 3 and 4 were, in our view, very problematic, and the big laundry list of A through T, I don't think is particularly necessary or helpful. But for most of them, as I said, I don't think we disagree that those are management rights.
All right.
Can we go back to the budget thing just for clarification? We asked if there was any money that was restricted in nature. In 16-17, starting fiscal year 16-17, as part of our state appropriation, there was a special appropriation within there for STEM program, which was $2.3 million. And we've received that money every year since then, and every year we have to put that money towards STEM-related programs, and every year we're required to actually, in May, provide them a summary of expenditures and a summary of outcomes and performance in those funds. And being that those are specifically listed out as a special appropriation of those funds, at any time the legislature in the next budget year can remove that $2.3 million from the operating budget. So again, those dollars are restricted to STEM-related programs, aviation, cybersecurity, science, math.
Okay.
Do many actually go to science or math?
Absolutely. Last year, we hired faculty directly from the STEM budget in arts and sciences. That's right.
Okay.
They all came
So
from
that-
STEM.
Okay, well, unless there's any other questions or discussion, I think we've probably both had a lot to talk about. It's 10:30 now. I'm gonna either come back or touch base at 11:30.
Yeah, it's fine. Do we have another room?
Well, yeah, the one we were in before.
I think we got a bigger room in D
Yeah,
building, right?
D212. We're in D212 for the second.
Then we can stay here if we want.
Yeah, we'll let you can stay here if you want again.
All right, we'll do that. Just gonna-
Yeah.
I don't know if you have any faculty members. So
I
yeah,
don't think-
so just discuss it.
I think I know, yeah, so that D212, yeah.
I knew the STEM money was there, but I never knew that.
But see the strategy.
I'm gonna email you the two Word versions of the Zoom.